What is good, guys? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one, I want to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of tickers out there. I'm going to break down what the technicals are suggesting, what's going on with their earnings coming out, and how the news that's coming out could affect the markets. But before I break anything down about all this information, before I talk about all these different tickers and how they could affect the market for this week, let me just mention a couple of things before starting. I am firstly not a financial planner, so take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100 into the account, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks plus a $50 cash reward. The offer ends in just about 11 days, so check it out before they run out. With that out of the way, let's get on with the video. All right, so Tesla was down 1.7% for the day on Friday, but it actually gapped down quite a bit before getting a small bounce. And after getting that bounce, there are some signals suggesting that this may continue as the algorithms are starting to shift. But the question is, what could cause the market to bounce, and how are things looking for the collective market to end up affecting Tesla? I'm going to break all of this down over the next couple of minutes. But first, let's talk about the news. How are things looking so far? All right, so looking at the news, we're seeing all of these things coming out about how the 10-year Treasury yield is continuing to go up, which is bearish for the markets. There's all this talk about Michael Burry shorting the market crashing and this and that, and lots of people are becoming more and more bearish, talking about the market potentially crashing. Now, I just want to remind you all that I don't think that that's how it's going to happen, because even if we do see a big drop in the market, a big pullback, or even some kind of massive correction, we're not going to drop in a straight line. We're not just going to drop and drop and drop every single day. There are going to be weeks where we sell off, but then there's going to be like one green week or 1 week where we get a small bounce before any continued selling. And that's why on SPX, this is the S&P 500 index, we basically have this potential head and shoulders like structure that could be developing, at least from a technical standpoint. And even though they don't always end up, playing out how you would expect, I just want to mention that we are technically sitting at support, and we did see SPX try to bounce just a little bit, at least for the time being. So if this thing continues to try to bounce, if it tries pushing up from here, there is a chance that this head and shoulders could end up playing out. And if it were to play out, right, this would be telling us that there might be a small bounce in the market. It's a very temporary bounce just to start us off for the week before we do see some potential downside later on. And if this is the case, if we are going to bounce off support, what could cause this thing to bounce? And going back to what I was saying, we have Nvidia's earnings. So that could play a big role, not to mention the fact that Apple is quite oversold and this thing is due for a bounce. So I think Apple and Nvidia could be two stocks to really dictate the flow of this market, especially because the overall algorithms that are dictating the stocks out there, they're starting to turn a little bit more in favor of the bulls, right? This is actually very important. If this does maintain, this could help the market quite a bit. So what I'm thinking is that even though we have all these other earnings, the biggest one is going to be Nvidia. Nvidia might start pumping for Monday and Tuesday and parts of Wednesday as it approaches its earnings. We're going to see a lot of retail hype and this and that. And all these different analysts, like I showed you guys yesterday, are saying Nvidia could go to 600, 800 a share. It's going to explode, raising their price targets, which makes me a little suspicious about how it may move after earnings. With all this hype, if it does pump really hard approaching earnings, there is a chance it could reverse. And that's the reason why the whole market could make a big U-turn later on during the week, especially because later on during the week, we have Jerome Powell speaking. We have Jackson Hole. We have a speech from Powell as well. All this stuff is going on towards the end of the week. So I wonder if we get this like temporary bounce from Monday through Wednesday, then starting Thursday, we start to see the market sell off. That's a real possibility. And that's kind of like the direction I'm taking right now for the markets. Now, in terms of data, just as a reminder, we have Powell speaking at the end of the week, and we know the guy likes to rug pull the markets, and the Fed has been quite hawkish as of recent. So there's a good chance of that happening. But going into the days before that, we have PMI for Wednesday, and then for Tuesday, we just have like some Fed speakers and some, Fed services index data. But tomorrow's Monday. There isn't really any data coming out that's too significant. It's going to be kind of like a chill day in terms of data. So that gives the markets some potential to try to just get a temporary or a technical bounce without being as dictated or moved by pieces of data. So with that coming out, not to mention us approaching Nvidia's earnings, I think the market is going to get a temporary bounce. I also want to add that on the fear and greed index, we're actually getting super close to the fearful side. And what's very interesting is, are we going to go straight to fear from this point on? Or right before we hit fear, could they give us a little bounce to try to like throw off investors, as everyone's talking about a crash right now, as the puts are going crazy right now? Could they give us a temporary bounce right before the market turns fearful, before giving us another like bigger drop later on, right? That makes me a little suspicious. This makes me makes me like a little bit indifferent in a way, and there's a possibility of that bounce as we're about to get fearful in terms of sentiment. This could be a trick. So market momentum is less greedy than before as we're approaching the 125-day moving average. Looking at other things out there such as the stock price strength report, it's becoming less greedy. Same thing with the current McClellan volume summation index. It's now neutral, went from greedy to neutral, which is showing us the current buying and selling formations right now. And then what else is important is the put and call options formations are becoming more fearful. The puts are coming back in the market. People are becoming more and more short, and we're starting to see this getting more and more fearful as fear is driving the market. Market volatility is very fearful right now as the VIX is now once again quite far from its 50-day moving average, and this is continuing to go up and up. This is very important to note. Now, as far as Tesla goes, there's some interesting news coming out about the Cybertruck over the weekend. There's a lot of talk about how Tesla's continuing to improve it and it's continuing to make more and more of the roads. I think this is pretty awesome as we're seeing more of them actually being delivered, and this is great news for Tesla. So maybe this could help the company at least to some extent. But for now, we're just going to wait and see what news comes out for Monday because that's going to be a lot more impactful. There was some bad news that came out a couple of days ago about how Tesla had a massive data breach in May, which affected more than 75,000 people. So could this cause Tesla to like gap down just a little bit? I think that's possible, but I think that what's going to affect Tesla more is going to be the collective market. And I do believe there's a good chance Tesla could hold up quite decently looking at the current technicals. Now, I also want to add that looking at Tesla's overall data, the Morgan Stanley, UBS, and other ratings that came out are saying Tesla is going to perform equally with the market, which means that if the market does get a collective bounce, this could help Tesla to some degree. Now, on top of this, earnings are going to quite a while away, so we're going to be waiting to see how deliveries look. But the price price ratio is declining just a little bit. Tesla is not as strong as what it once was, especially over the last few months. But it still could perform equally with the markets as we saw Tesla drop quite a bit for the last couple of weeks. Mondays tend to be green about 53% of the time. Most of the time, Tesla's a little bit more green on Mondays. That's a good chance for it. And then we tend to see a little bit more volatility during the third hour and also during the fifth hour of the trading day. So watch it very carefully during these times. And last but not least, looking at the short interest, this didn't really go up too hard. That's the good thing for Tesla. It's not really exploding. We're not seeing insane amounts of shorting. It's kind of just like stuck at this lower range, which is a decent sign for it so far. Now, finally, the volume on Tesla has been quite interesting. 136 million. We saw this thing dropping in the morning, gapping down, but then the volume went up. We're getting good volume and we're seeing buying pressure. As I said before, the algorithms are shifting. The net flow is becoming more bullish so far for the market and Tesla, at least as of Friday. If this perpetuates, we're going to see this help the market out for Monday. The overall short volume percentage is dropping, which is a good sign for Tesla. We're not seeing aggressive shorting. We're actually seeing Tesla trying to hold up. So now let's break down these charts. How are things looking? I'm going to start off with trading view. There's a possible head and shoulders developing on SPX. Could this thing drop a little bit more before we get some kind of bounce? Sure, that's a possibility. But looking at the current technicals, it looks like it might try to bounce from here and try to form this right shoulder, right? I'm not saying we're going to just like, shoots to the moon and just go and go and go and go. I don't think that's going to happen. I think we could just be forming a right shoulder for more downside a little bit later on. This is what's looking more probable in my opinion. Now, looking at something else like SPY, what else could add on to this? And I want to talk about both SPY and SPX, not just like one over the other. But what's good about SPY so far is the fact that we have a potential bullish structure developing on it as it has this inverse head and shoulders that is developing. And it's looking quite decent so far. We have a nice inverse head and shoulders like structure that has been developing. There's a possibility the more bearish case would be it breaks below 434.8, comes down to the support around like 432. And we hit 431.5 before getting some kind of bounce. The low 430s then a bounce. That is possible if we get some bad news, or we could just bounce from here. Those are the two possibilities, right? We either come down to 431.5 and bounce, or we just bounce from here. I think the odds favor a bounce from right here, thanks to Nvda and thanks to Aapl. And you want to be watching this resistance around this 436.5 area. If we break this, watch 438. If that breaks, it's going to push up to 440 most likely, right? These imbalances are going to act as magnets, pushing the price up because of the change in the net flow, right? The robots, the algorithms, if we drop too hard in one direction, right, and let's just say there's not enough negative news for that to continue, over and over again and we're due for a bounce, the robots like to push us back to these levels. That's one of the ways to look at the market in a very simplified manner. The algorithms like to push us towards these imbalances, and I could see it try to get back to 440 if we break 438. But first, we have to hold above 436.5. I think the odds favor that. So for Nvda, I talked about this over the weekend. We have a very, very bullish looking structure that could be developing on it. Zooming out of it, what I want to mention is that we have this potential flag that's forming on it. Looks quite decent. The full measured move will take this thing up to about almost 470. Technically, it doesn't have to go that high though. Like 460 plus is a real possibility. We have this nice structure. We're going to be watching if we could break above this. We had this big drop first before getting a bounce. This could be the liquidity grab as buyers start to step in. We saw a lot of volume. Look at the volume right here, looking quite nice. I think the odds favor Nvidia trying to push up to 441.5 to 442 first. If we break that, there's 446, 452, 460, and the list goes on. I think it looks more bullish approaching its earnings. It may pump approaching its earnings, but with all these price target upgrades and things like this, there's a chance it may fall after its earnings. But just to be safe, we're going to be watching it carefully. I think before earnings come out for Wednesday after the market closes, we might see this thing push up, approaching it, which could help the market pump. Another thing that could help the market pump is going to be, hold on, Apple stock. Aapl could also help the market pump as we're forming a nice inverse head and shoulder structure. There's a bullish divergence forming on it as well. It could come down a little bit first. It could actually drop like this first to retest, this low point at around like the 173 before getting a bounce. That's another possibility. But being oversold, seeing the net flow changing, there's a good chance it's going to get a temporary bounce and try to push up closer to about 177. We have this imbalance up here. I think it's going to try to make it up to 177. If we break 175, that's most likely going to happen. So we're going to be watching these resistance levels and a potential bounce on it first before we do anything. And I think the odds favor that for Aapl. So watch that very, very carefully. This could help push SPY, the whole market up, and then the entire momentum that develops could help Tesla push up as well. For the QQQ, before I talk about Tesla, for the QQQ, look at this. Same thing as SPY. Okay, there are two possibilities. It could drop one more time from a bullish divergence, then get a bounce, or it just bounces from here. I am leaning more towards this one right here, this green line right here. I think it's most likely going to try to get a bounce. It could come down a little bit to about 357 to 356 before it tries to get that bounce and push back up. We have a bullish divergence. We have an inverse head and shoulders. The odds do favor this thing pushing towards this imbalance around this 363 area. Let's see if it could get above 360 first. If it does so, the odds will favor upside. I think I'm leaning more in that direction, looking at the current trend. Now, is this going to be sustainable, long lasting? I don't know. I don't know for sure. I actually kind of doubt that because of Jerome Powell and also because of Nvidia. But it's just a temporary bounce I'm calling. I think it's very likely. I think the odds favor that. Now for Tesla, there are two possibilities for it. It could drop a little bit more and then get a bounce, or just bounce from here. We did get some negative news about a data breach, at least the information from the May data breach, I mean. So two possibilities. I think it could come down. If it breaks below 215, then there's 212.5, then 210 that could be tested. Those are supports. For resistance, you're going to be watching 221, 225, then 230 above that. What seems more probable for Tesla? Well, we got this breakout from this resistance, at least during the after hours. Because we pushed up during the after hours from Friday, there's a good chance it might actually come down a little bit as we start off, retest 215, then try to bounce. Maybe we see a liquidity grab, but there's a possible inverse head and shoulders structure developing here, a nice accumulation phase. The odds favor this thing pushing up to 221 to 225, in my opinion. It looks more bullish than bearish. So I'm leaning more in that direction thanks to the overall market, the net flow that's changing, and the bullish structures that are starting to develop. Is it a major change in market structure? I wouldn't necessarily say that, because even if we do push up to like 225 or 230, we could still establish a lower high and get rejected, as the stock has been making lower highs and we're nowhere near the 300 level. So it could just be a temporary small little bounce. I do think the odds favor that. I'm not saying it's going to be a crazy one, but we have this imbalance at 225 that could act as a magnet for Tesla. Now, for the rest of this video, I'm going to go over these technicals very briefly. Let me just mention that the PPOs are starting to flip. You could see on SPY, it was oversold, about to get a bullish cross in the PPO. The odds do favor upside. I'm open to any possibility, right? If it does break below, like, for example, if it breaks below 434, we could see it come down to 433, 432.5, and 431, and then get the bounce after 431. or it could just bounce from here. I think the odds favor it bouncing from here based off the bullish cross on the PPO. If you look at the MACD, it's almost forming. Same thing for Tesla. It's about to get a bullish cross on the PPO. Could come down to 215, then bounce, start pushing back up to 225, then potentially, 230 after that. I think the odds favor that for Tesla. I'm leaning more bullish in that direction. A little drop in the morning before a bounce seems more probable after this thing drops so hard in such a little period of time. Not saying I'm a perma bull on Tesla. I'm not saying it's going to keep going and going. Just a temporary bounce is kind of like expected after getting so much downside. I think the odds favor that thanks to Nvda and etc. Thanks to the market. If you look at Aapl, if it breaks below, if it breaks above 175, you're going to be watching 177. I think the odds favor that. We're about to get a bullish cross on the PPO as well. That's another bullish signal. For the QQQ, we're about to get another bullish cross on the PPO. Could come down a little bit more and then try to get a bounce back to about 360, and 363 is possible after that. For Nvda, we're about to get a bullish cross as well on its PPO. We're about to see this thing push up, in my opinion. We could see it start pumping thanks to its earnings. There's a good chance of that potentially playing out. So I just want to be honest with everyone. I think it's very, very important that we, look at these different levels. I believe it's very important to look at the market in a very, very unbiased manner. Now, I also believe that it's important that when looking at Nvda, we watch the resistance levels just for extra safety, because it's very important to remember that the whole market has a tendency of moving on similar formations. And with this going on, I think Nvidia could play a big role in dictating the momentum for the week. For Microsoft, we're about to get a bullish cross as well. If we're bearish, you're going to be watching 315, then 312. If you're bullish, you want to watch 318, then 321. I think the odds favorite coming down to like 315, then bouncing and pushing up for 318 plus, then potentially 320. It looks more bullish as we're about to get a bullish cross on the PPO. AMD is going to follow Nvidia, in my opinion. Could come down to retest 104 before getting a bounce and pushing up to 109, then 111. I think the odds favor that for AMD. I'll watch that very carefully with Nvidia. I think it's going to be very important. For the NASDAQ, it's testing the 4-hour 200 EMA. If we get some kind of bounce, we could see this thing push up to 13,500 first. If it fails to do so, we could see 13,000 break. But I think the odds favor this thing bouncing, at least temporarily, and coming back up to 13,500, which could be bullish. I already talked about SPX, but on the VIX, we formed a bearish divergence right over here on the 4-hour time frame. The VIX could be coming down back to this like 16.3 level just for a temporary drop before another bounce later on. I think the VIX may start to slow down. If it does slow down like this could help the market. We also got a bearish cross in the 30 minutes time frame. That could be very significant. The dollar also has a bearish divergence starting to slow down on the MACD. The PPO is starting to cross negatively, so that could be a bearish signal for the dollar, which would be bullish for the markets. Same thing with the 10-year Treasury yield. It's starting to get a bearish cross on the PPO. If it starts dropping temporarily to about 41.7, that would be bullish for the markets. For Google, you're going to be watching support around this 127 area, then there's 126.5. If it bounces off here, you're going to be watching 130. I think there's a good chance it's going to come down and try to bounce, and we're going to see this thing push up for 130 first. Now, it isn't looking that strong on the 4-hour time frame, so I'm going to be watching this 200 EMA as support. I think it could try to bounce off 126.5, so it might start off kind of weak with the market and then get a bounce. For Amazon, same thing. It might come down to retest 131 before trying to get a crossover. If it breaks above 135, we're going to be watching this thing start pushing for higher levels. I think it's going to come down a little bit, then push for at least 135. We're about to get a bullish cross in the PPO. Meta has been oversold for quite some time, so there's a good chance of it trying to bounce. We're going to be watching and try to get back to 290, but first we have to break 285. It might come down to retest 280, bounce off that, and start pushing for 285. If that breaks, 290 is on the table. I think the odds favor a small bounce on it as it's quite oversold. So with that said, guys, I want to end the video from here. I'm not saying that I'm a perma bull. I'm not saying the market's going to squeeze forever. I'm just calling a very temporary bounce before we see some more possible downside in the future. Once again, for Tesla, it could come down to 210 and then get the bounce, or it could drop just a little bit and then get a bounce very close to where we currently are. And I do think the odds favor the second possibility, coming down just a tiny bit, then getting a nice bounce and pushing back to these imbalances at 221, then potentially 225. I'm leaning more bullish on Tesla, at least to start off the week, but everything could change. Listen to me carefully. Everything could change after Nvidia's earnings. If Nvidia starts sinking after Wednesday, or because of Jerome Powell speaking at the end of the week, he could cause a big rug pull to end the week. So be prepared, be open-minded, and do what you have to do. And I'll see you guys tomorrow for the next video. Tesla the market to the moon as the long term is still incredibly bright, and peace out.